Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I'm your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to click that subscribe button below and join the Passive Income Posse. You definitely want to be a part of the posse. And welcome to this episode of the Passive Income Podcast. Tom Brickman, you know him on Twitter at thefrugalgay11. I just checked, over 39,000 followers now. You've grown your Twitter following immensely. I'm going to throw it over to you to give yourself an introduction.
Thank you for having me, Dividend Dave. My name is Tom Brickman. I am 40 years old and I live in Dallas, Texas. Last year, I was able to comfortably leave my job where I worked as a movie theater manager because I bought real estate for the past 18 years. I also have an eBay business called Cheap Cheap Closeout, and I started the Frugal Gay knowing that I would have some free time. And I wanted to kind of let others know that, hey, you can build wealth on a very average salary.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. And that's a very important point. You don't have to be pulling in, a 250K a year salary to build wealth. You just have to be patient and stick to your game plan. Like you said, with your game plan has been primarily physical real estate, but as well as a lot of my listeners and viewers know that, the dividend game is strong as well. So, and I know that you're a little bit involved in that type of passive income as well. So I'm not really sure where you want to start. If you want to talk a little bit about your dividend investing, or if you want to dive into real estate investing, I'll just throw it back to you, and we'll see where this conversation takes us.
I always feel uncomfortable talking dividends because I have such little exposure. I'm invested. I have that $100,000 brokerage account. And I would say on a regular basis, on a yearly basis, I'm bringing in maybe 2,000 to 2,400 a year in dividends. So I completely, and they just reinvest. So I completely understand that game. But I say let's start with the real estate because that's kind of been my playing field for the past 18 years.
Sure, sure. Well, and you know what? At the end of the day, that extra 1,800, $2,000 a year, you're not going to say no to it. You're not going to say, "Hey, no, I don't want that $2,000." You're going to say, "Thank you very much," right? Like,
I'll take it any way I can make it. And I mean, I if I can make money on it, that's kind of what I've done, and that's how I've gotten to where I am. Because a lot of people in those 39,000 followers over there on Twitter love to say, "Oh, you were handed money, you were a trust fund, you got this, you got that," and I didn't. That wasn't the case.
right.
I was brought up in Ohio with the if you want it, you have to earn it. So I started
Yep.
really young at like 10 or 11 mowing yards, and at 15 I was at a restaurant, and at 16 I started working at the Gap, and that kind of got me rolling unexpectedly. I worked at the Gap because I couldn't afford the clothes, so I got the half off price. And I stuck with them through college because they did tuition reimbursement.
Oh,
And
wow.
they also had a Gap stock purchase plan at the time. So I was purchasing stock quarterly straight from my check. So when I went to go buy that first property, I cashed in my Gap stock, and I had a $9,000 down payment for my first property. So that was, I wanted to look good, but it worked out way more than just looking good because I bought that first property. I got school paid for as I went. So it was a win-win-win working for them.
Yeah, wow, that's a great story. I didn't know they did all of that, and yeah, that's incredible that things worked out so well for you by, working for the Gap just because you wanted to get their nice clothes less expensively.
For half off. That was the thing. I mean, the kids in high school wouldn't make fun of me if I had the Gap clothes on. So that was my way of doing it. And there were a couple other kids at high school that worked there. So it was a great starting job that I didn't even know, because I think when I started there, I made $5.15 an hour. So it wasn't a great paying job, but it had perks
Yeah.
like the tuition reimbursement and the stock purchase plan that just can't be beat. So
Yeah, those are all great perks for a relatively low paying job back then
yes,
too. Like, because you said you're in your 40s, so I'm guessing
I
that's
just I just
25
turned
or so years ago, right?
I just turned 40 this year. So that would 1998 was when I started at the Gap, and I was 16 years old. It was like 2 weeks after my 16th birthday. And I stuck around. I stayed with them about 6 years, and all through college, and it worked out really well.
Wow, those are all really good, like you said, really great perks for, I guess, yes, a relatively low paying job, 5 or 5.50 an hour, whatever you said. And, back then too, when you're younger, you're 16, 17 years old, even that 5.50 an hour isn't too bad. You don't have a lot of expenses. You're living with your parents. They're paying for groceries. They're paying the bills basically, right? So
That
you're
was
getting
my
a nice
fun.
little paycheck
That was
and
my
you're
fun
getting,
money.
yeah, and you're also like, wow, tuition reimbursement, stock purchase plan,
Yeah.
and half off Gap clothing. Those are
It
wow.
was win win win. But I remember when I got that first raise there, I had worked there for a year and I went from 515 to like 538. And they're like, you did above average and all this. And I'm like, oh, that's horrible. Um, and I'll say this as well. I didn't know that I signed up for the Gap stock purchase plan until like maybe a year or two into it. My dad had it was at the time where you were still filling out paperwork, and I took it home and he helped me fill it out. So he checked that box, and I just thought it was an extra tax for quite a while. But I think by 18 I realized I was buying something or getting something from it instead of it all just going to taxes. So it worked itself out.
Wow, that's great. So I guess because I'm not familiar with the Gap stock, if it even still exists. I'm guessing that wasn't a dividend paying stock, so you weren't seeing any like,
It is a dividend paying stock
oh,
actually,
so
and I don't own a ton of it, but I still own its GPS is its ticker symbol, and I say I probably have, I don't, maybe 100 shares of it, and it's not consistently performing well, but that's okay because it's been my company, and I think we're in the $12 range right now. But yeah, it's one of those that's part of that 18 to $2,000 a year that I collect in dividends, and it still pays a tiny dividend currently.
nice.
Yeah,
Wow. So you actually, so one of my favorite sayings is, I love it when companies pay me to not work for them. So you worked for them for 6 years, but now 20 years later or whatever, they're still paying you. this
I
is this is
it's
great.
actually all the companies I worked for. I worked for so I left Gap and I went to Target for a little spell, and I have Target stock, and they pay a great dividend. And I spent my big chunk of my career at a movie theater, Cinemark, and they actually discontinued the dividend during COVID, but they did pay a dividend for quite a few years. So I
Wow,
hold all three of those, and they I,
this is
I
an extremely interesting way to build a career for young people listening. Like, get into a company that's going to give you these stock purchase options.
there's
And I've had a
some
few other guests that have been in this situation too, where they've had the opportunity to buy shares of the company they work for and just
there's
accumulate over time and realize, wow, I'm getting something here for, well, obviously for your work, but also a lot of these stock company stock purchase plans you're getting at, say, I don't know, let me know if I'm wrong with your situation, but a lot of times, you're buying them at, say, a 10% discount of market value as well, right? So
I think it was whatever it was the lowest point during the quarter is what we would get it at. And
nice.
that's just I don't know exactly. It's been years since it's worked. And Target I just bought not while I was working there. That was just a side one that I invested in because I like them. And
Yeah.
Cinemark, we had a similar kind of program as Gap where you could buy it out of your checks at certain rates, and it worked out well. All three times I've done that.
Wow. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
So I know we were
I
going to
love
talk
the
about
story.
real estate, but here I am talking about the Gap. So I bought that first property. I bought it. Everyone messages me and they're like, "How do I get over the hump of being afraid to buy real estate?" And I'm like, "Well, I was an idiot, and I was 21 and I didn't want to pay rent. I paid $375 in rent, and I'm like, this is too much. I don't want to pay anyone else." So
Yep.
I found a $90,000 duplex. I used my Gap stock to purchase. That was a $9,000 down payment. And I
So
lived,
10% down.
yeah, I lived upstairs, and it was no closing costs at the time. And my rate at the time in 2004 was 6.875. So when everyone's freaking out about the rates, I'm like, I've already been here and I've already done this. I know this drill, and if you can make it work at this, you can definitely make it work if it falls back down.
Right.
Um, So I bought that first duplex, and I lived upstairs, and the tenant downstairs paid 600, and my mortgage, my tax, and my insurance was $738. So I'm like, I don't know where I can live for $138, and that's
Yeah,
why I did it. It wasn't because I was calculated, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to build wealth. It was because I wanted to not pay $375 anymore in rent, and that was my next best option.
that's a great option because, like you said, yeah, you're not going to find an apartment for $138. Not even 20 years ago, right? Or 18 years ago, 2004. Oh,
Yeah.
19 years ago now. Happy New Year,
Yes.
2023.
Happy
So
New Year.
yeah, but yeah, so that's great. Like obviously, you can come up with that 138, $150 a month to pay your share of what's left on the mortgage and insurance and whatever else. And then of course, yeah, I'm sure you have some other bills in there as well, but suddenly you're not hurting by paying rent. And for those listening too that are right now thinking $375 in rent is really good because they're all right now, like if anybody listening is still renting, they're probably paying $1,000 in rent, because it's all of a sudden 2023. And as we've all seen, the price of absolutely everything skyrocket over the last year, 18 months, last 2 years. The price of everything has just gone up, and I know rent is definitely one of those things that is going up for people. But yeah, that's a great beginning. I'd love to hear kind of the progression of going from one rental unit up to 21. I believe you said you have
I
now.
Yeah, I have 21 doors. I've got number 22 under contract right now. They're actually doing an inspection on it today, and I will own that at the end of this month. And I've got door number 20 and 21 are under renovation. One of them's up for rent. I just signed a lease on it, and one of them's under renovation. So I'm actually collecting rent from 19 people this month.
That's
Um,
pretty good.
yeah, I'm excited with that. And a year ago, I quit my job just a year ago. It was January 7th when I left my job. I never would have, like, I bought 5 last year, and I at the beginning of the year, I remember when I wrote these goals last year at this time, I'm like, I'm going to buy 2 doors this year cuz I'm not regularly working, so I have time to do it, and I
Yeah,
ended up with 5. Some of them just made a lot of sense. Like the one that I bought in August, I had no intention of doing it, and I was up in Ohio for a funeral, and I texted the realtor when I was there. I'm like, "Hey, can you show me this place?" It was bank owned. It was really poorly listed, up on the market for a long time, and she had gone in, like, she got there 5 minutes before. She's like, "This is nice compared to everything you make me go show you." And then I went in and I'm like, "Oh wow, this actually is really nice." So we wrote a low offer and ended up with number 5. So that's how it works sometimes, and that's the one under renovation. You I didn't have plans on buying that one, but it was nice and in the right spot and the right price, so we went for it.
nice. So does
Um,
you have some properties in both in like around Dallas, Fort Worth, as well as Ohio?
Yeah, so I'm split, which I love because I have very little cash flow in Dallas and I have a ton of cash flow and very little appreciation in Ohio. So I kind of have the best of both worlds because I get the appreciation here in Dallas and I get the cash flow in Ohio. Like
Nice.
the one that's under contract is here in Dallas, and I could get 2 little properties up in Ohio for the same price as this one, but it makes sense to continue to grow them in
Yep.
both markets.
So let's go back to door number two.
Sure.
Door number
So
two.
so
How did you get from one to two? That's another big leap, right? Going from one to two.
It is, and I got really cocky, and I bought a property that I had no business buying. It was my door
Nice.
number 3, and I took out an equity line on door or property 1, and I used it to put down my down payment on door number 2, and it was a money pit all 10 years that I owned it, and I tweet about this one regularly, and it always gets lots of interaction because I lost $22,000 when I sold it. I lost money on it all 10 years that I owned it. And I sold it when I signed the paperwork. It was my birthday, and I had to write the title company a check for like 3,000 something dollars. And I was like, "This is the best birthday gift I could give to myself is selling this
Is
money
losing
pit.
3 grand.
Yes, I will gladly write you this check because I know I never have to pay anything else for this house again." And what it was I bought it at the top of the market in 2005. Um, it plummeted in 2008 and 2009, and it's rebounded now, but I
Yeah.
was just done losing money. And I tweet about this a lot too, where I'm like, you need to build a team, you need to build a team, you need to build a team. And this was in Cleveland, Ohio. My other properties are in Toledo, and I just didn't have a solid team. So I had a lot of tenant issues and maintenance issues, and it was just always a struggle to try and get anything done and get a tenant. And I had to go through my first eviction there, and it was just a hot mess from the start to the finish. And I'm telling you, writing that check was the best birthday gift I gave to myself. So that one was a mess. So they're not always home runs. And I think that that's also why my account has grown, because I'm not the one who's going to make you the fake TikTok reels and say, look what I can do in 15 minutes. I'm going to tell you, hey, I lost a lot of money on this. And
But I learned and I grew from my learning experience, and
I
you
hope
need
you
to
don't do the same. Yes.
hopefully
Don't
you can
go.
learn from my mistakes, but also learn from your own mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes. We all do, right?
I was just I do coaching, and I was just talking with a client, and I'm like, if it were me, I wouldn't do this. And I can tell you why. And I know that that's not the answer that they wanted, but I'm like, this is a money pit right here. And you're overpaying for what you're getting, and you're not going to rebound. And ultimately they said, okay, yeah, you're right. But that's part of what I do, is I don't want you to make those same mistakes that I've made over the last 18 or 19 years of doing this. And I've made plenty along the way, I've bought, that was not my only money pit along the way. So,
So let's talk about how you got from okay, door number 1 and 2. Then let's just kind of go through, like, say 3, 4, 5, 6. How did we start building up?
sure.
And
So
I'm also with that, sorry, that kind of an add-on in there. With the time frame, seems like that 2008 too, when the housing market just tanked. So let's just sort of, you probably would have answered that in your answer anyways, but I'll just throw it back over to you.
So that's where door number 4 came in 2009. And I wanted it back in 2008 when the prices started to fall apart. But I went to the bank, and they're like, you have too many loans and too much debt. You need to get rid of this. So I did. I went and got a second job, and I worked retail for a year. And I would just get my checks, and I would drive across the street and hand them to Citibank. And I paid off my debt. And then after a year of that, they're like, all right, we'll give you a small loan. And that was wild, getting a loan in 2009, because I had gone through it in 2004 and 2005, and it was like signing a piece of paper and nothing. And then, like, this 2009 experience was like extreme, to where they're like, why are you spending this money? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And it was just a night and day difference. So it was a rude awakening. So in 2009, picked up my first property in Dallas. And I just made it a mission to buy at least 1 or 2 a year. And I focused on what the investors ignored, and the cheapest way for me to get in. And I bought as many cash properties as I could a year. And there was some years where I would just pick up one, and I'd spend all my money trying to fix it. And then there were some years, like 2013, I put in 3 offers on the same day, and then all 3 came back accepted. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have to figure this out. And I bought all 3 of them. So
Wow.
it's, and like I said, like that one that we bought back in August, it was like, do I have this extra $45,000 to do it? No, not really, but I'm going to figure out how to make it work. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing with that one right now. And that's why, we're in January and we're still working on it, but that's okay, because it's halfway done, and it'll be rent ready in another 30 to 60 days. So sometimes you just have to go through it. And when I say I figured it out, I worked my salary at the theater. The theater moved me down here. They said, go down to Texas for 6 months of training and we'll move you back. And that was a lie, because I've been here for 17 years. But I moved down here for them, and I bought my first one in 2009. And if I just relied just on that salary from the theater, I would not have been able to buy these properties. So I went back to my roots, which started in college, which was eBay. That was always kind of like my fallback. Like, Gap did the tuition reimbursement, but they didn't pay for the books. And there were times that books were $400 to $600. So I'm like, I have to figure this out, because they're paying me $5 an hour, and I can't buy books.
Side hustle. eBay became the side hustle.
That was the side hustle. And it's been like, I call it my safety blanket at this point. And you can even, I was just looking at my 2022 numbers, and I got real lazy with eBay for about 4 months. And the graph shows when I got lazy, because you can tell when I started listing again in August, the graph goes up like this. So It's been one of those that I do it as needed. I don't ever actively source, like, even just, I've listed a bunch over the past week, and it's not stuff that I'm going out and actively buying. It's stuff that I've acquired and just set aside, and I have a huge listing pile, and I have gotten to it now, and it's all listed now.
Nice.
And that's been, and the months that I was lazy, I still let sales come through, so we were still doing a few $100s in sales every month. But it's been one of those that has been a way for me to generate extra income without a ton of extra effort. And I know it's not 100% passive, because last night I'm sitting here and I'm taking pictures and I'm listing. But the next step for me then with that
But you're
item,
not
like,
working 8 hours to make that
it,
$100.
exactly, I'm laying in bed watching Netflix while I'm taking pictures and
Yeah.
and listing. And last night I listed a couple things of makeup, and this morning I had a sale on one of them already. So the next step is I'm going to throw it in an envelope and get it over to the post office. But I would pick that over asking for PTO any day.
Right. And before
And
we
that's
started recording, you said that you're in your eBay room right now, so you just
I
have a lot of
am
just have a lot of stuff in there.
I have a bit. This is a large screened-in patio that we put walls up on, and this is where all the eBay merchandise stays. And then this is where my desk is when I do recordings, and it's
Nice.
we try and keep it as organized as possible, but always at least one or two things gets lost a year, and then you find it after you've canceled the order, and you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I
but we
email you back? I found it.
I've done that before. Like, I canceled an order and I'm like, oh, I found one, and then she rebought it.
Nice.
So
Wow.
yeah, it works out that way.
No, so
Um,
yeah, like you said, not super it's not completely passive like the way dividends are that they just kind of roll in every month or every quarter, but very little work
and
to make some eBay income if you have. And again, you have to know what you're doing. You can't just buy something for $10 and expect to sell it for $100, and you have to know what people want to buy, and you have to know what kind of deals there are. But if you sounds like you've been doing it long enough that you've kind of figured out that part of the game.
I have, and yes, I don't go for the $10 stuff. And there's so many people. Someone DM me today, and they're like, "I heard that you should be doing sneakers and you should be doing Legos and this." And I'm like, I don't sell any of that because it's high dollar stuff to start.
Right.
I focus in on the $2 stuff that I can sell for 20, and so on. And just like my real estate, I'm kind of focusing in on what everyone else is ignoring, because that's where I've had my success. And
And what is it that
those
you focus on that everyone else is ignoring in real estate?
in real estate. So I started with those condos, and I remember I bought one in on the courthouse steps in I think it was 2012. And I bought it in cash. It was a HOA foreclosure, and I lived in the complex. This is the same complex that I bought in 2009. And the owner would go out and fight with the management, and it was very public about this whole drama. And I knew that they had foreclosed on it, and that's what they were always fighting about, because I was standing there watching this whole thing go down. So I went and I bought it. And I remember standing there, and I'm bidding back and forth with the courthouse appointee, and all these other investors are looking at me like I'm an idiot, and like, why are you spending all this money? I bought the condo; it was $9,501, and I just remember the glare there, and I just remember I'm like, I'm just doing my own thing, and you know what? This condo makes sense to me. And they gave me a handwritten note, and later on that day, I remember I jumped over the fence. I had to break into my condo that I bought. It was vacant. That the owner had moved out. They knew that they had lost it, and I quietly worked on that one for 2 or 3 months. And as I made money, I invested it back into it and fixed it up and turned it into a rental. And that's always been kind of, I'm selling makeup and pajamas and discontinued stuff. Like, I've got perfumes and lotions behind me. And it's always been, that's kind of the ignored, there's a lot of money in discontinued stuff that people don't even realize. Yeah, they're selling it for $3 today, but it could be $100 tomorrow, one of those types of things. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, people
where
get really attached to things, and suddenly, if it's discontinued, they can no longer find it. They're going to go on eBay, and all of a sudden, oh, hey, somebody's selling it. I used to pay $3 for it at Walmart, but now I have to buy it for 15 on eBay. But I loved it so much, I'm going to spend the 15.
I just sold $100 thing of nail polish that I paid $1 for. That I didn't that
Oh,
And I'm not joking. I had a bunch of them, and I used to it's an ugly color, and I used to give it out as my free gift with purchase for people. And then a couple weeks ago I scanned it. I'm like, I wonder if this is worth anything. And there was one other person and there was one other sale and they had it for 150. And I'm like, man, I'm going to list this thing for 118 and see if anyone will bite. And sure enough, somebody bought it.
I'm speechless.
When the sale came through, I'm like, I cannot believe that someone just gave me $100 for this, and I used to have to give this away because I couldn't get rid of it. But it's one of those
Wow.
super rare ones that didn't even get sold publicly. It just went into gift sets at one point, and that's the other thing too. When I source stuff, I'll source it from vendors at flea markets or companies that will donate stuff off, and I'm super brand loyal and make sure I can source where my products came from. And these are ones that I think that they got donated at some point, and then I picked them up from a vendor at a flea market, and I know this color. I remember I'm like, I don't want those. And he's like, oh, just take those with. If you buy these, I'll give you those. And because he wanted them gone, and I'm like, okay. So that's why it was
Yeah.
my free gift, and I regret giving them all away. But hey, I sold one for 118, so it made up for all the other ones that I gave away.
Yeah, pretty much in one shot. So
For
sorry,
sure.
we've been kind of jumping back and forth between
Yes.
your story of acquiring rental properties and the eBay side hustle. We were kind
Yeah.
of up to sort of, the 2012, 2013, so about 10 years ago now. And so 10 years ago, where were you at about were you up to 10 yet or
Um. Gosh, I was getting close because I bought one in '09. Yeah, I really started. That's where I hit because I was 31 at the time, and I hit $1 million net worth, and I think I was at 9 at the time when I hit that, and that was a crazy year. I bought 3 that year in 2013, and
oh yeah, you just
um,
said, you're right.
yeah, that was so I was at 9, and there were a couple years that I picked up 4, and I did take on partners at one time in Ohio on 2 of the properties, and it was more of me dragging them in because they wanted to invest, but they were afraid to.
Mhm.
And it's been one of those that I've just continued to grow it, and and again, like in 2020, I bought a duplex, and then I bought an $11,000 house that I bought on Craigslist. And people think I'm crazy when I say $11,000, but it was just one of those where the caretaker inherited it from the person that they were taking care of that passed away. And they were like, I don't want my family to know that I'm selling this off because they want the property. And I went through the title company, and they're like, yep, this is all ducks in a row. And I bought this house for $11,000, and I put $14,000 into it. And it's actually my favorite tenant. And I know it's terrible to say that I have a favorite tenant, but of my 21, she's definitely my favorite. Because I think she takes care of it better than I could, to be honest with you. Every time I go over there, it's just spotless and well kept, and
Wow.
yeah, it's always great when you find one of those tenants. But it's a $25,000 investment that generates me on that one. Her rent is $795, so it's one of those
Wow.
that's why I haven't gone all in on dividends, because if I can turn that $25,000 into a seven.
$800 a month for
Mhm.
perpetuity, and, well, more
Yeah.
because in the future, that rent will get raised.
It will, but not she's my favorite, so she's staying at that for as long
Yeah,
as I can
she's
keep
not
her
gonna
at
get
that.
raised, but someday she'll move out and you'll raise it for the next person.
I will. And that's not all, the 795, I still have tax, I have insurance on the house. It was a cash purchase. But I've bought, I have a property in my portfolio that's a $450,000 door, and then I have that other one at the opposite side of the spectrum that's a $25,000 door that could probably sell for 40,000 now. But I'm well
Where
versed
do you find a
across the
house that goes
spectrum.
for 40 grand?
Toledo, Ohio. That's why I'm there, and I have a great team there. And
So when you say
I've
team, you'll have, like, a property manager and maintenance people, like, people that go and cut the lawn and plow the driveways and all of that stuff.
I have 2 property managers, so it's split. So if one kind of messes up, I can bounce them over to the other, and so on. And I have a good general contractor, I have a good landscaper, I have a good plumber, I have a really good HVAC guy. And I think that's where a lot of people mess up as well, because you can always find that 15, $20,000 property, but if you can't find someone to do the work, or somewhere, like there was a client recently, and she's like, I want to buy this, and I'm like, it's in the middle of nowhere. It takes you an hour and a half just to get to like a Walmart.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to want to rent this from you. I don't know that if you spend all this money and do this, if it's going to really make sense. And again, it was one of those that they didn't like the answer, but ultimately they agreed, and it's still
Yeah.
sitting there on the market. So I think that's the other thing is you need to, when you're understanding your market, and that's why when people are like, oh, I want to invest in Toledo, I want to buy an $11,000 property. I'm like, I'll help you, and I'll tell you you don't want to buy certain spots and you do want to buy certain spots, but I think understanding where you're going, and like I have a client, he's going up to Toledo this week just to understand the neighborhoods because he'll send me stuff and I'm like, that has gang graffiti right on the walls. You don't want this. And he's like, well, it's a really good and it's got, and I'm like, no,
Yeah,
you'll lose
right?
money.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow, I didn't know that there was anywhere in North America that had real estate that inexpensive.
it as I work with people, and I started doing the coaching in April and May out of a constant request. And as I do these other markets, and I'm in Mississippi and I'm in Oklahoma and I'm in Louisiana, it's amazing some of the opportunities that are out there. Um, but it all boils down to, okay, who's going to do this for you? Because again, you can buy that cheap property, but if you don't have someone that wants to rent it and you don't have someone who can do the work for you, it's not really a deal because it's just going to be a money pit sitting there costing you money.
Right. Wow. Wow. So yeah, I guess we've kind of talked about sort
Bounce.
of then through the teens, like the 2020 teens, 2013 up to 2020, and where you are present day with the 21 doors. And I guess what's the end goal? 30, 40,
So
50?
10 was always the end goal while I was working. I'm like, once I get to 10, I'm going to stop. And I haven't stopped. I'll tell you, I skipped over two fun ones that I like to share. So in, I believe it's 2017 or 2018, I bought a crack house on eBay that I didn't know was a crack house, but we did have a shooting while we were working on it. And we did
I'm
have
sorry for
people,
laughing, but oh my goodness.
we had people trying to come and buy product regularly while we were working on it. So it was a really rough house that I should have never bought. So that's another one that I like to just touch on because I don't want you to make the same mistake. And that's like one of those where you see these $15,000 houses and you're like, should I do it? And if it's in the roughest area that no one wants to live, the answer is no. And I learned that the hard way. My dad, when he went up to it, he's like, you need to just walk away from this one and just lose the money. And I'm like, no, I'm going to make it work. And you know what? It did work out in the long run because I ended up selling it off to a tenant who wanted to own it, and he takes really good care of it. I bought the side lot from the city for $150. It was one of those situations. But I wouldn't ever do that again. And then in 2020, I bought a hoarder house and down here in Texas, and it was in the middle of the summer, and it was the most draining experience. And I made a lot of money, but there was other factors to it. I still hold it. It's in my portfolio. It's a great property, but it was
Okay, I gotta
drain.
ask.
Yeah,
So the hoarder house was just full of stuff.
it
Did you
was
find anything that you sold on eBay?
because the majority of it had to be trashed because there were animals running in and out of the house. So we got very little out of the garage because that was the only room that the door was closed and everything was preserved. But I would say 98 to 99% got trashed.
Trashed.
Yeah.
So no great finds,
There was stuff that I threw away that
no
I
like rookie cards of some famous athlete or anything like that.
now this goes back to my specialty, but there was a men's candies cologne and there was cases of them everywhere. Um, and I was using one case as a door stop. It would hold open the door, and I threw it away. And then there was also, in addition to the hoarder house, there was hoarder storage units, and there was a case of them over there. So, anyways, I sold off this storage unit to someone for $800 or $1,000, and I saw this person listed those men's candies colognes on eBay at like $147 a bottle, and they were selling. And
Oh,
I'm
goodness.
like, I threw away hundreds and hundreds of these bottles of perfume, and then you're selling them for $147. I did something wrong. So it's not that great. But I did throw away some stuff that I probably shouldn't have. and I learned that the hard way. And it's one of those that when I started, I got a 20-yard dumpster, and I'm like, this will, we'll get a couple of these and we'll be done. And by the end, it took me 11 40-yard dumpsters to empty the
Oh,
house.
wow.
So it was like that first day, it took us only 2 hours because all we got through was the foyer. We didn't even get into a room because it was that hoarded up to the ceiling.
Wow.
And it was an experience. So I did find a Leica camera, it new in its box. That was the best thing, and I kept it. I didn't sell that on eBay. And there were 3 items that the seller needed us to find as part of the terms of sale. So as I emptied, I only did it myself and with friends because I didn't want these 3 items to go missing.
Right.
Um, and they weren't particularly, one of them was like a watch, and just they were sentimental things, but I didn't want something to go missing and mess up the whole sale. So
Yeah.
I emptied them with friends. So I knew what was going out. So that was an experience as well. And I get asked that one a lot, and I made money on it. It's a great rental, but it was so draining. And I felt the sadness of the person who hoarded. And you could tell by the layers, like when it started and there was a death in the family and it started after someone had passed. And
Right.
it was a sad situation, but it was one of those that I've gone through it and I don't know that I could do it again. And I try and, when people are like, oh, I'm going to buy this hoarder house and I'm going to flip it, I think that there's stuff that goes into it that you don't even see on the surface because they have these hour-long shows on HGTV that make it look so simple.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's called editing. They just cut it all down
Yes.
to an hour, but it's hundreds of hours of actually going through all of that. You
Yes,
have some incredible stories about all of these different, rental units that you've purchased. I do, like I said before we started recording, I wanted to bring up this tweet. I think you tweeted it on New Year's Day, maybe a day or two ago,
I
and
did.
just how a
Yes,
year can really change your life. 1 year ago, 2,400 followers, a job that drained you, 16 rentals. I'm sure that's kind of draining as well, and 60 pounds overweight. Then today, actually, like I said, you're up to 39,000 followers, no draining job, rentals producing income, down 60 pounds, and present with family. There's a big one too. So let's just talk about this. This tweet really, caught me when I read it yesterday. So this is a great tweet. Like, I guess any thoughts on what you said here?
I didn't. So I was going through and I was scheduling content for December, and I didn't even realize what my follower count was until I saw this tweet that I tweeted back in last December, and I'm like, wow, 2,400 to 38,000. That's an insane jump. And
Yes.
I never could have pictured this sitting here last January. I knew that I was starting to get traction. I was starting to get, do you want to come on and talk on this podcast? Do you want to do this interview? But I never pictured myself here. I knew that the job was the big thing, and getting rid of the job that just emotionally drained me. And it was great 15 years ago and I loved movies, but it just, by the end, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And going through, I had put in my notice before, back in 2019, and they're like, hey, what will you stay? It's really close to your house. And I took it, and I regretted every moment of it. So just being able to get rid of that. And then, it started out slow last January, but then, I got into this routine where just like tomorrow morning, I know that I'll be up at 5:30 and at the gym by 6, because I have a meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30. So I like to go and do the gym, and you just get in these routines. And I didn't have time for that before. And that's why I put owning my time is huge. And I think
Yeah.
I did another tweet recently where I'm like, I think I've spent more time with my family in the past year than I have the prior 15 years
I saw
of
that
working
one
this,
just earlier today as well. Yeah.
yeah, of that. So that was, there's so many benefits to what I was doing. And yes, it was really hard when didn't have money to do this renovation, and didn't have, even the hoarder house, I ran out of money in the middle. And it was just, how can I figure this out? How can I work through this? What can I sell on eBay to make this make sense? And um, I, this past year really has made me realize, okay, everything that I've been working towards was 100% worth it because I own my time. I can go to the gym. I have a great routine. This morning I got up, I went to the gym. We have that inspection going on over at the property. I stopped over there, and I schedule my time with things that are important, and I don't have to ask for a PTO anymore. And that's the other
Yeah.
benefit that you don't even think about when you're wealth building or saving money or paying down debt is all the other things that come along with it. Because I didn't know, a year ago, like I said, I couldn't have seen myself with 39,000 followers. I couldn't have seen myself 60 pounds lighter because I haven't been that weight since early college days and that. But it was just, I had ownership of my time, and I was allowed to go to the gym, and I was allowed to spend time with family, and I was allowed to, do those things. And that's been an awesome side effect of doing all this.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it's just been an absolutely incredible year for you.
It has been, and continuing to like I said, you're my first recording today, but I've got two more after you and more tomorrow. So I love being in a spot to be able to share this and help others see that they don't have to live paycheck to paycheck, because that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, is this paycheck to paycheck mentality.
Yeah.
And that's part of why, you do dividend. Everyone has how they can build wealth, and once they see the effects of, yes, you're only getting $1 from this dividend every year, but okay, now it's rolled over and now you're getting $2, now it's $4, and
Yep.
so on and so forth, that it's a snowball effect, that there's a lot of positive that comes with it.
I have a saying. I used to work. I used to live paycheck to paycheck. Now I live direct deposit to direct deposit.
I live rent check to rent. No,
Yeah.
I've got enough income coming in from eBay and all that I don't feel that stress anymore. It's just one of those.
I feel like you're still working very hard, whether as at eBay or at renovating houses or cleaning out hoarder houses or whatever. You're still, obviously, you're working very hard. You're managing people. You're managing property managers and landscapers and plumbers and managing all of those people. But you've become your own boss. You're not answering to the movie theater or that manager at the Gap 20 some years ago, right? Like, you've become your own boss.
And I've also started to hire on for things that I've, prior to this, I was answering all the tenant calls and I was doing all the eBay orders, and now I have a hired employee that'll come in a day a month and help me organize eBay and get stuff listed and fulfill orders. So I've started to outsource some of it, which I never was able to do in the past, and now it's just a sigh of relief on those days that I have helpers to help continue to do this.
Nice. I am going to share another screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Come up. So this is your link tree, and if you just want to kind of talk about your link tree as well.
Sure. Currently, right at the top, I've got book a free intro session. If you want to just talk about, I'll talk about eBay, I'll talk about real estate, I'll talk about whatever you want. If you want to talk about RuPaul, we can talk about RuPaul. Anything you want, you can book a free session. Right below that, it's my Twitter link, my Instagram. I've got a newsletter that goes out once a month. On that, I try and spotlight others that are doing the same thing across the country, because everyone says, well, it's really easy to do it in Toledo, Ohio. But there are many doing the same thing that I'm doing in all areas of the country. And I actually I know you're up in Canada, but I've worked with a couple of investors this year that are in Canada buying down in the States. So I know that there's opportunities out there. Right below the newsletter, I've got landlord insurance. This is a big one that I struggled with, which is why I highlight it. And it's because I would try and get insurance, and they're like, you have too many properties, we can't insure you. And this company right here specializes.
Wouldn't you think an insurance company would be salivating at that, saying, oh, we can charge this guy like boatloads for every property that he owns?
They were charging me for the ones that they had, but this is a landlord specific broker that encourages you to have lots of doors and doesn't shun you when you come to them. And that's something that I struggled with as I grew. I was just like, I can't find any more insurance. What do I need to do? And I stumbled on them. I contribute at Cashflow University. It's a Discord group. It's a monthly thing. And like, I'll put in products that I'm sourcing. This week I had a bunch of sales come through. I posted a deal back in November, and I'm like, you buy this item and you get these 10 items for free. And then this week I was posting in there about how much I sold those 10 items for. And I actually sold the 10 items for more than the original item that I bought in the first place. So I got that item for free, and then I sold off the other 10 items. And then right below that, I have a link to my eBay store. If you just want to check it out and just kind of see, okay, this is what this guy is selling and this is what he's doing.
Nice.
That's how you can connect with me.
Yeah, so you can easily find this link tree. I found it just through your Twitter profile, so you can follow at the Frugal Gay 11, and I'm sure that's easy to find as well because now that you have 39,000 followers, it's easy to find big accounts on Twitter.
It is,
Um,
but I'm getting the bots that are pretending to be me, so it's driving me
oh,
crazy. When I search in the frugal gay, and then you'll have like four frugal gays, and so just be careful with those bots. I promise I'm not going to DM you and try and sell you any crypto courses or any of that.
right, right. Awesome. So I have a quick story because I just heard it on the radio on my way home today. So, and this pertains to you a little bit. I thought about this because I knew I was going to be talking to you about rental properties and rental income. So it's a very tragic story that over the holidays there was a house in Hamilton, Ontario that burned down. So Hamilton is just between Toronto and Niagara Falls, sort of at the west end of Lake Ontario. The house burned down. Two adults, two children died. Very sad, tragic story. So what I just heard on the radio on my way home is that obviously, fire inspector, blah, 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 working smoke detectors. So what I just heard on the radio on my way home is that this was a rental property and they're now considering charging the landlord for not having the working smoke detectors. So I guess first, fair warning to any landlords out there listening, make sure your rental properties have working smoke detectors. But then my thought also was, well, they're the people living there. Shouldn't they have and again, if this were to ever go to court, I'm sure a really good lawyer would argue the point that they're the ones living there. Shouldn't it be partially their responsibility to know that those smoke detectors are working as well? So I guess just, safety warning. Again, this stems from a very, very tragic story that, it's holiday season and suddenly there's two adults and two children that died in a house fire, which, that's not the type of thing you wish on anyone or anyone's family to happen. But so uh, I'm sorry that we're kind of ending this or
Ending on
getting
a
towards
sad
the end
note.
of this on a very sad and tragic story, but kind of, I guess, what are your
I
thoughts on some of the responsibilities of a tenant and the landlord?
I cover my basis where we do the yearly inspection to make sure, and I do have it hardwired and battery because tenants love to unplug it if it's beeping with the battery. So the majority of mine, unless it's a really old building, and I do have some of those where I can't get wiring to it, I have it, and then it's checked once a year. And I don't just do the smoke; I do the smoke and carbon monoxide
Yeah,
combinations. And I think that I think as you're telling the story, I think it's going to be tough to prove the negligence because it could have been one of those situations where the battery was beeping and the landlord didn't know. And I think there's a fine line because there's a lot of things as landlords, like I make sure that they have the furnace filters, and if they don't replace it, um, and it doesn't get done, that can cause the furnace to go out in the middle of the winter. So I think that there's a lot that goes both ways. And I think it's about being diligent about making sure that you're doing that inspection once a year. So you're not having a tenant that is taking the batteries out, or a tenant that's hoarding your house, or a tenant that's selling drugs out of your house. Um, and I think that that is one of those that I understand why they would say that, but it's going to be tough to prove
yeah,
unless there was none installed at all.
yeah.
And I've bought them, and I remember I closed on a commercial space, and there were three tenants living in it. And the day that I closed, I like as we were signing the paper, we went over there and we put up the smoke and CO2 detectors because when we did the inspection, we knew that they didn't have them. And like we signed that paperwork, and that was the first thing I
First
did
thing you
was
did.
put those in all three of those units because I'm like, that's dancing a fine line. Like that, you don't mess with that.
Yeah,
And I buy the 10-year ones, so I have a little tracking app, so I know when something's going to need to be replaced. Just because it becomes less effective after the 10 years. I think their Kitty brand is the name of them, or I'm probably saying it wrong. But I think unless they were completely out of there, if it's one of those where like the battery was out of it, that's going to be tougher to prove.
right. And it's hard to prove after the place is burnt down as well, too, right? Like,
Right.
the fire inspectors can determine so much, but they're also just dealing with a pile of
I
ashes.
I think that I think that there's been a case in the States, and I remember um they were able to prove it because there was a photo that they had of the person, and in the background you could see that the top was off of the fire and the
The
battery was out of it.
smoke
So they
detector, yeah.
were, yeah. So it was one of those where it was probably beeping, and they took out the battery, and that was
Didn't replace it.
right. And that's why I like the majority of mine are hardwired. So you can take out that battery, but it's still gonna beep if there's a fire, as long as
Nice.
it's hooked up, as long as there's power on. It's one of
Yeah.
those. So yeah,
Well, that's smart because, if the power goes out, then the battery backup. If the battery's taken out and the power isn't out, you have the power. So worst case scenario is like, oh, the battery's been taken out and the power is
and the
out. It's
power's
like,
out.
oh,
Yeah,
geez, well, that's just a perfect storm. Well, you can't predict that, right? So, no,
right,
I think you're doing it obviously very smart. You have to be, and yeah, that's
for sure. Safety. That's
wow.
always like with this inspection we're doing. My main and I even just said that to we're working on that door number 20 up there, and I'm like, my main priority is safety. So what can
Yeah,
we do to make this as safe as possible? Because you don't want someone, you don't ever want that circumstance to happen, and you don't want to. I've had a fire before at a property, um, in the past 18 years, and it was one of those where it was a condo, and the condo next to us caught on fire, and we just had smoke damage in ours, and everyone was okay, and it was during the day, and the tenant just contacted me and let me know, and the tenant was moving out already, so half of his stuff was at the new place, so I was super thankful that he was half moved out when it happened.
right.
um
So it
but
could have
yeah,
been a lot worse
a
situation.
100%.
Wow, this has been an incredible. I see we're well over 50 minutes already of just talking. This has been
We
an
are, and we didn't get to touch on dividends that much, and I
well, a little
apologize,
bit.
but yeah,
I,
we
I've
we
been
had
I
our.
was really impressed off the top about how you used your stock purchase plan options in the companies you worked for, and basically flipped working at the Gap into now owning 21 doors and soon to be 22 and more. Right?
I would
Like
have never thought that at 16, and that was never the plan. I just wanted those cheap clothes, but it worked out that way.
that's incredible. I want my half off my Gap clothing, and 20 some years later, you're
I still shop at Gap too. I support them. I've got the stock. I've got the clothing still, and I think that they indirectly set me up without me even knowing they were setting me up. I
yeah,
just wanted that cheap
definitely,
clothes,
definitely.
so it worked out
That
well.
that 9 grand, right? That 9 grand has gone a long way.
I still own that property too. It's still I got paid rent for it yesterday, so it's one of
Wow.
those that it was a great purchase when I purchased it, and it's a great neighborhood, and it was just all the stars aligned. And again, it was one of those at 21, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was guided along the right way. So it makes or and that's what I say to people when they're looking at properties. I'm like, this first property can make or break you, so you don't want to get a dud right off the bat because it can.
Right.
People have these nightmare stories about landlording and landlords, and you don't want that either.
Yeah, that first one is a money pit. Like you said, number 2 or number 3 was a money pit, but luckily you already had number 1 to sort of rely on a little bit.
It cushioned the blow, definitely.
Yeah, because if number 1's a money pit, you're probably done, right? Like you can't recover if number 1 is a money pit. So you have to be very smart on your first rental property. You have to be extremely again, it comes back to what we always say, do your own due diligence. Make sure you know what you're getting and what you're getting is good because yeah, I would hate to see people think they're getting into rental income properties to all of a sudden have a money pit that wrecks them, right?
And people will say, "Hey, I've got this deal, I've got this deal," and sometimes these are just people trying to dump off their duds to them at a
Yeah.
deal price, and I'm like, "It's not really a deal, it's a secret deal that nobody else can see, so you don't want that."
But you seem to go
So
for
yeah.
these deals of these $11,000 properties like
That one was I had sold something in Dallas, and I did a like-kind exchange into other properties, and I had money sitting on it, and I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna have to pay the gains on this if I don't find something," and then I'm just like I actually offered on another one on that street, and I'm like, "I wonder if there's anything else on this street," and there was nothing listed, but then I went on Craigslist, and I saw one on that street, and she had just listed it, like, 58 minutes prior, and, the stars just aligned. It just worked. It was a cold December day, and we went over the next day with a contractor and made the offer, and, it worked out well.
I didn't even know you could buy property from Craigslist. I guess you can buy everything on
I think
Craigslist.
it's different
Huh.
by market. I think it very because you go in Dallas and it's very sketchy, but then there's, the few random listings in Ohio and they're legit. So I think
Nice.
it varies, but yeah.
Awesome.
But
Awesome.
thank you for having me today. I
I was just gonna
appreciate
say thank you so much for being a guest on the Passive Income Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you for the last 55 minutes, close to an hour. And yeah, anything you'd like to say to wrap up?
you guys can find me at the Frugal Gay 11 on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, and the website is thefrugalgay.com if you want to book a free intro and just talk about anything, because I will do that.
Cool. I
Have
will
a
do
great
my
day.
best to have links in the description.
Thank you.
Awesome. And if you're still watching this late in the program, you have to subscribe. Those are the rules. You're still here. Just hit the subscribe button. It's free. Just hit the subscribe button. Okay. Thanks for watching, everyone. Subscribe.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. That was awesome. I just hit end recording. So we're done recording.